You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Lifeline, offering a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement, promoting resilience, safety, and survivability. On this episode of Lifeline, we'll hear from Nick Breul, the Officer Safety and Wellness Senior Project Manager here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. As National Police Week 2023 approaches, Precinct 444 wants to continue promoting officer safety and wellness with a special episode focusing on suicide prevention. Suicide awareness for law enforcement officers, or SAFLEO, is a core initiative at the Memorial Fund and is federally operated by IIR within the Bureau of Justice Assistance. SAFLEO is nationally recognized and integral to assisting those officers who need it the most during the lowest of their careers. And now for Lifeline. What is SAFLEO?
One of the programs that we have here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, which is tied to the third pillar, which is our Officer Safety and Wellness pillar, is the SAFLEO program. SAFLEO stands for Suicide Awareness for Law Enforcement Officers. And this is a program that is run through the federal government, the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Memorial Fund has a cooperative agreement with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research, otherwise known as IIR, and we work together to fulfill this grant, this program, which is designed to prevent law enforcement suicides. Many of you may be aware or may not be aware that there is a tremendous problem with officers making the decision to take their own lives. Recently, some legislation has been passed to help those families of officers who took their own lives and were subject to trauma from a specific event that may have led those officers to suffering from PTSD. Or having a traumatic event that fed into their coping skills. In other words, they had trouble coping with that incident, and it led to them either attempting or actually taking their own life. And there is now legislation to support the families with benefits if, in fact, a law enforcement officer who suffered trauma and suffered with mental illness or mental problems as a result of a traumatic event. And this can also be tied to, on-the-job stress and the stress that this job brings with it. But the legislation was just passed in 2022 and now allows for families under some guidelines to get benefits where they were never, ever before entitled to benefits. Suicide is a problem across the first responder community. But here at the Memorial Fund, along with the SAFLEO program, we work to try and track suicides in law enforcement. And actually, it's the FBI who now have been tasked with trying to get data and track just exactly how widespread this problem is. And of course, that takes reporting. So agencies are encouraged to report if you've suffered a loss, if you've have an officer who decided to take their own life. That's something that needs to be shared with this FBI unit, and certainly something that we need to be paying attention to. And that's SAFLEO is sort of an outgrowth of this problem, and it's roughly estimated that 2 times the number of officers who are killed in the line of duty each year take their own life. So it's a tremendous problem. The numbers for 2021 of confirmed suicide cases were around 170, but we all believe that number is actually low because you just don't capture every case through the manner in which we would try and get them. Either they're reported, we learn through them through word of mouth, or we read about them in some of the publications, law enforcement publications or websites, or in the general news media. So it is a problem. And this program, SAFLEO, is very effective in that it has a sort of tiered approach. And the reason it has a tiered approach is because you have to start with the top of the organization to get them to buy in. And you'll hear that all the time when we're talking about wellness programs and fitness programs and different programs that are sort of out of what law enforcement is normally used to having. So buy-in is important. So we have an executive leadership class. We then have a first-line supervisor class. And then we have a line officer class. And then the fourth class we have is train the trainer. And that's a 2 full-day class to then get the representatives from your agency or agencies, if they're participating in the training, to learn how to present this SAFLEO training and get it out to all of their members. So I'm here today, after I just gave you all that information on SAFLEO, to talk about a training we hosted here on March 7th, 2023, at the National Law Enforcement Museum. We hosted a SAFLEO training for the metropolitan area, and Washington, D.C. has a number of law enforcement agencies, not only surrounding the city, but in the city itself. And we had participation from a great number of agencies. We had the Metropolitan Police from D.C., we had members from Amtrak Police, we had members from the Fairfax County, Virginia Police, the Montgomery County, Maryland Police, and a number of different agencies. They don't all come to mind right now, but a lot of people were very interested in this subject and sent several people to talk about it and to learn what this program was all about. So it was a line officer training that we gave. There were a few supervisors in the training, but there are also recruits. And when the agency that wanted to bring their recruits first contacted us saying, look, we've got recruits, is that okay to send them to the training? My first thought was, well, no, this is really for officers who, have some experience. But then we thought about it and we thought, well, we're not telling these recruits anything that they aren't going to learn. Why not we get them that information while they're in the academy? There really should be no surprises in law enforcement, and everyone should know exactly what they're getting into and what the pitfalls are. And that's really what the SAFLEO line training is about. It's about recognizing what the challenges are, understanding what the challenges are, looking at the solutions, and then forming an action plan so that you personally, as well as you and your agency, can begin to look at preventing and getting to those individuals who are showing signs that they're struggling, they're having difficulty coping. And it's not just with people who have already reached crisis. SAFLEO has got a number of it has a number of components for things like mindfulness, for recognizing those triggers for people. And one of the things that SAFLEO does train on, and we spent a good amount of time on it in the training on March 7th, was what we call the spiral of despair. And it is a sort of self-fulfilling model, which is a trap that law enforcement officers can fall into if they don't pay attention and pay attention to each other. So the line officer training, while it's teaching you to recognize the problems that you and other officers may develop, it's also teaching you to be an advocate and to make sure that you take care of each other when you see these things. And one of the things in the first line supervisor class that you will see is also the encouragement to have those conversations with your subordinates when you recognize those things that begin to manifest themselves that could spell trouble, meaning that it could be subtle symptoms or signs that employee is struggling. And it could be they're struggling with alcohol. It could be that they're having marital difficulties. A lot of the times when we do the SAFLEO training, a lot of the stress comes from the organization itself. And you'll hear officers talk about not only the stress of the organization and the rank structure and their angst with shift work and all the things that go into that, but Also, the social pressures that are out on law enforcement right now, the very negative perception, the constant media attention to any misconduct or perceived misconduct by law enforcement officers, and it makes it really, really difficult for law enforcement officers in 2023. And SAFLEO is here to help officers recognize that and use the tools that we can give them, but also use the resources that hopefully their organizations would have, such as peer support or chaplaincy programs or your EAP. All of those are very important elements in a wellness program that will support officers who are struggling mentally or emotionally. I know one of the greatest stressors that I experienced as a police officer was financial. And I went through a time here on the Metropolitan Police in D.C. when I was a young officer with just under 10 years on and kid on the way, and they cut our salary by 13%, and we couldn't even get toilet paper and paper for our copier machine. It was allotted to us. And, you know, that really created a lot of stress as we're about to, bring a new child into the world. And the next thing you know, we need money for daycare. And my salary's been cut. And it can create a great deal of stress. And that in itself, that financial stress can then lead to other things, such as officers taking part-time jobs. Now they're fatigued. And fatigue is one of the things that SAFLEO addresses. Fatigue because of shift work and then being in court all the time, fatigue from not getting your days off because you're being held over constantly, and fatigue because you're burning the candle at both ends trying to make ends meet. And that creates a whole host of problems. And in this spiral of despair model, a lot of these things are almost loops that feed back onto themselves because, if you're having stress at work, you might decide you want to drink, and when you're drinking too much, then you're not resting, you're working too much, and that creates more stress, and that feeds back on itself in a loop until it pushes you into a really bad place. And it's important that we deal with these challenges that the job poses and that we are advocates for each other. And the most important thing that law enforcement can do, I mentioned that, it's a top-down. We have to get the leadership involved in this, but we also, within our own ranks, need to crush that stigma, get rid of it, the stigma of asking for help. Law enforcement is a very strong-willed group of people who take pride in being able to manage themselves and be tough and have that hard exterior, which you do need to have at times. But you certainly need to be able to seek help and not have to worry about whether or not someone's going to suspend you or take your gun away. There are agencies now that are helping officers with drinking problems. Even if they've had an issue with drinking that's manifested itself into some discipline or something, there are agencies that are still trying to help those officers through that to get them back on the job and to get them healthy. So that's what SAFLEO is all about. And I would encourage you to go to their website, safleo.org, SAFLEO, and see the trainings that they have. There are lots of resources on that website. There are a lot of videos. There are a number of posters. There's some white papers and things like that you can go through. And if you're a member of an organization that wants to start, say, a peer support unit or is interested in therapy dogs or what they call station dogs, which are a really big thing now where you have these dogs that just help with stress relief that are in police stations and can be brought to scenes to help people as they're emotionally coping with a trauma. These are things that are available on the SAFLEO website. And I would also let you know that we have a website called Destination Zero, and there are some videos on there. We call them tabs, and that stands for Technical Assistance Briefs. But if you go to the Destination Zero website, which is destinationzero.org, you will see other resources. You will hear from the individuals who have that alcohol counseling program, who have therapy dogs, who have created entire wellness units within their agency because their agency has taken such a strong step towards helping their officers and creating an environment where their officers can come forward and get help. They're actually being so proactive that if there is a critical incident, they have trained people go to the scene immediately to start talking to officers. Some agencies even put in policies where you go talk to a professional, one who is culturally competent. And what we mean by that is someone who understands the unique issues in law enforcement that officers have to face. So it encourages people to make use of all those resources. And there are agencies that have really put together some tremendous supportive programs for their law enforcement officers. SAFLEO currently is going to be in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, Virginia has taken an interest in this training, and they will be down in Richmond, Virginia from May 16th through the 18th. And on the 16th, I believe they're offering a line officer training. And then the 17th through the 18th, they are offering a train the trainer session. So if you're nearby or you want to make the trip, I would encourage you to register for the train the trainer section and send some good people to bring this training back to your agency. And I know that SAFLEO is going back up. We were in New Haven last December doing some training there, and we were in upstate New York doing training. And then, of course, I mentioned we were down here in Washington, D.C. SAFLEO has been out in San Antonio, and they're trying to get to these organizations that are experiencing problems, but also getting to organizations that are interested in getting ahead of these issues. So there's quite a lot changing on the front with regard to mental health and wellness and well-being in law enforcement. And it's certainly time. I came on the DC Police in 1987, and we had an EAP with a very competent doctor who was there for us. But the negative stigma of asking for help and being part of the so-called rubber gun squad was always something that would hang over your head if you really thought, like, I want to go forward and say I'm having problems because I'm stressed out with all of the horrible things I'm seeing and experiencing. So times have changed, and certainly changed for the better. And I'm very proud that the Memorial Fund is part of this effort. It's going to help us keep names off the wall. It's going to make law enforcement safer, and it's going to get law enforcement officers from that hire to that retire mode. Because that's ultimately, where we all want to be. I'm retired, and I'm so happy that I did my time. I love the job, but I'm happy to have made it through to retirement. I know a number of men and women who didn't make it through to retirement, and that was a number of reasons. And I also experienced a number of suicides during my 25-year career. So I'm very pleased that the Memorial Fund and the Department of Justice are taking a strong look at this and have put forth not only some legislation that may help alleviate some of the burden for some of these families, but also put forth this program to help our law enforcement officers.
Thanks to Nick Breul for providing insight on the SAFLEO program and for your continued efforts to further officer safety and wellness, and for stopping by the podcast studio to reflect on the initiatives behind making it safer for those who serve. Resources about the SAFLEO program are in this episode description. Many thanks to you for listening to this episode of Lifeline, a Precinct 444 podcast from the National Law Enforcement Museum. We hope you learned something from this episode of Lifeline and will join us again here at the Precinct. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the Precinct.